What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Caught by Happy podcast. Here we are in the middle of May in the year of our Lord 2020. Wow, what a crazy time we're living in. And boy, who would have thought a global pandemic would cause even more division in this country? Just when you thought we as a nation couldn't get more divided over politics or personal beliefs, something comes along that should unite us toward a common goal and actually does the complete opposite and causes people to entrench themselves even deeper into their ditch of political beliefs. This whole notion of fake news has now turned into fake science, and people are just going to believe whatever they want to believe and do whatever they want to do because that's the country we have. That's the country we built for ourselves. Everyone's trying to pull one over on you, right? So you go ahead and do whatever you want to do. You'll show them, right? Sure, more people are going to get sick. But who cares if you're not one of those people? Sucks to be them, but hey, you got a haircut and you look great. And the economy has come roaring back and everything's fine and we're all just hanging out and having parties at the Home Depot because we don't have physical jobs to go to anymore. So why not get cozy with one another as we browse the peonies and the cherry tomato plants? I do it too, though. I'm going a little stir crazy myself. I'm sure you all are. The other day, I went to the grocery store for a full-on shopping trip, where I perused the aisles at my leisure. I picked up non-essential items like Cheez-Its and pizza rolls. You know, all those things that I normally wouldn't put on a Instacart list or a click list. Those impulse buys, if you will. And yes, I wore a mask and I kept my distance and I was smart and conscious of others, but it felt good to do something normal. And then it felt good to make a tray of pizza rolls and gorge myself on something I shouldn't be eating as a reward for doing something I really didn't need to do. We're all going a little stir crazy though. We're all fed up. Virginia, we're in the middle of reopening phase 1, so I think that's a good thing. I mean, maybe, we'll see. I'm one of those people who prefers to listen to doctors and scientists when it comes to this type of thing, and not your crazy cousin or uncle or some idiot you went to middle school with on Facebook who thinks it's all population control conspiracy invented by Bill Gates and Mork from Ork. What I'm trying to say is, in this moment, I'm fine. I'm doing okay. My family is doing well. We're all stressed, but we're getting through it. But I swear to God, if there's no football in the fall, that might be the tipping point for me. Anyway, today on the show, I'm talking to someone who is smart and intelligent and uses critical thought and critical listening in her profession. Natalie Garramone is the owner and principal consultant at 180. She specializes in conflict resolution and mediation, so coworkers and managers, bosses, employees can have an open dialogue with one another so they can actually chart a new path forward and get some work done. Conflict is tough, right? How does one even get to be a conflict coach? I think it takes a special type of curiosity in your fellow human beings and a ridiculous amount of patience to be able to listen to what someone is saying, hear them, really hear them, and then make an action plan that they can follow to get over the hump, have an outcome that they are agreeable to so they can finally move past it. So she's going to talk about how she became a superwoman conflict resolver, all those stops along the way. And by the way, she was named CEO of her former company before the age of 30. So you know she's got the chops for running a successful business. Natalie is also a fellow upstate New Yorker, which I didn't know that going in. So that was a nice surprise for me because anytime I get to chat about crazy winters and beautiful summers, it's a good time. But before we get into it with Natalie, I want to tell you a little bit about the Allswell mattress. Designed to make good sleep accessible to all, the Allswell mattress features hybrid mattress technology combining the best of both worlds. Memory foam and individually wrapped coils for a winning blend of comfort and support. Their goal was to create an affordable mattress without sacrificing quality or luxury. And the result? The Allswell Queen costs $345. You heard right, $345. What? And you can get one with free shipping, a 10-year limited warranty, 100-night risk-free trial, and financing as low as 0% APR. Follow the link in the show notes, and that'll let Allswell know that I sent you and help support this show. Also, everyone, please make sure you leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, or you can email me directly at caughtbyhappy@gmail.com. I read and appreciate all your feedback, so keep those good words coming. And if you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, shoot me an email or message me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Maybe we'll set something up. Okay, she's the queen of conflict resolution, and I can tell you just from the 1 hour I spent with her, she's very determined. She's a very driven person who genuinely enjoys discovering the motivations behind why people are the way they are. She's definitely an inspiring person who can offer you, my dear listener, a little bit of direction, calm, and objectiveness when you're dealing with workplace conflict. She loves what she does, and that's what we're all about here at Caught by Happy. So, here's my chat with Natalie Garramone.
Are you from upstate New York?
I am indeed.
No way. I
Are
mean,
you?
yes. Where are you from Buffalo or just upstate in general?
I'm from north of Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
A little town
Whereabouts?
called Wilson, which
Okay.
is if you know Lewiston,
I do.
then I'm right next to Lewiston.
So funny. Wait, are you
Right?
located there or are you in Richmond?
No, I'm in Richmond. I grew
Oh,
up
okay.
there.
I'm from Utica, New York, if you know where that is.
I do know where that is because I went to college at Cortland.
Oh my gosh. And I went to Ithaca.
Oh God, I hate you already.
How funny. We should be hopefully you're recording this. This is kind of
I am recording this.
I love an upstate New Yorker. Man, I'll admit my bias there.
All right. So
Can't help
you graduated from Ithaca?
Graduated from Ithaca.
What
yes.
year? I don't mean to go so personal and ask your age right away, but what year did you graduate?
Graduated 08, business administration,
Oh,
concentration in marketing, minor in legal studies. That was me.
Okay, so you're quite a youngin.
Youngin, I guess. Yeah. I mean, if you zoom in a little bit or if you look too closely, you see a lot of gray hairs.
Okay.
But
you were there well past my time. I graduated Cortland in 2000. So
oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So what did you think of your time? So you grew up in Utica and you went to Ithaca. How did you like Ithaca?
Yeah. I love Ithaca.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
City, town, it's gorgeous.
It reminds me so much of Charlottesville.
Yes. And I read or heard or something somewhere that it was the same architect. I have no idea if this is true, by the way, but I heard that it's the same architect that designed the Commons in Ithaca and I know it's not called Commons in Charlottesville, but the Commons in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first moved to Virginia and I saw the Commons in Charlottesville, I thought, wow, yeah, that has to be right because it looks so similar.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, because I thought the same thing when I was in Charlottesville for the first time, thinking, I feel like I've been here before.
Yeah. I have no idea if that is true or not. And to be honest, I've not taken the time to really research it in more depth. But yeah, Ithaca is really beautiful. And I loved when I was in college, I stayed and worked in the summers. I worked at, I don't know how frequently you made your way into Ithaca, but worked at an Italian restaurant, kind of off of the Commons, and just loved it there. I mean, just really, really enjoyed my time there. And then moved down to Virginia for a change of scenery and, of course, warmer weather.
Yeah. Why? What brought you to Virginia?
After college, so 08, if you'll recall, I mean, wasn't the most fantastic time to be looking for a job. We're in a similar place right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, just had an opportunity, had family friends down here and decided to take a chance and move for, like I said, change of scenery, job opportunity, and ended up finding both. And that was 10, almost 12 years. I moved in 09, I believe. So it's been a long time, longer than I intended, actually.
So did you come right to Richmond from there? Or did you hop around Virginia a little bit before you made it here?
Straight to Richmond, and had visited once before. And I visited had to have been like January. Maybe it was January of 08. And I remember not wearing a winter jacket down here. And I was just like, I think I can do this. Like if I can enjoy a place in the dead of winter, then I'm pretty sure I'll like it the rest of the year.
Yeah. I remember my first not wearing a winter jacket moment because I moved down here in December. In December of 2000, and I remember calling my parents. I was outside and I was not wearing a coat, and I was like, I'm not even wearing a coat right now.
Like if you're from upstate New York, your mind is blown at that. I mean, when I moved down here, I left and there was snow up to my knees.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Well, I mean, Buffalo area gets a lot of slack for being, like this, getting a lot of snow. But you in central New York, I mean, that's the snow belt. That's where you guys got hammered with snow.
So much snow.
Yeah.
I don't miss it. I don't visit in the winter anymore. I can't do it. I have like a certain amount of time that between May and like end of August, and that's it. Cause it gets hammered with snow and it's freezing cold. It's snowing there right now. I mean, or it was snowing just a couple of days ago.
People were posting pictures of people cutting the grass in the snow in shorts and a t-shirt while it's snowing. I mean, it's such
I know Mother Nature is confused and pissed off probably. But man, a snow in May is, I mean, it's happened. I do remember it. And I always remember Halloween's growing up, which I'm sure you do too. Like
Yeah.
cool costume and your winter jacket on top. Like
Right.
there's no getting around it.
Mom's not letting you out of the house if you don't put a coat on.
No way. No.
Ruining my He-Man costume. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, I mean, that was like a great way to jump in. Like, we've never met. I don't know you. And we all instantly have this central New York, Western New York connection. That's awesome.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Thanks for wearing the Bills hat, for giving me a clue.
I'm sorry about that. I wearing the hat only because, you know, I've got the quarantine haircut. Haven't had a haircut in a while. It's getting a little out of control, but at this point,
man.
I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to let it go, see how this thing plays out. I'm going to go back to like 1996 and see when I used to
try it out.
When I had my hair long.
Nice.
A little thin on top, but no, I'm wearing the hat because of that. I'm a little embarrassed about, you know, the wings that
it works. Hey, the look works. I love it.
So how are you? How are you holding up with all of this craziness that's going on? Before we get into whatever it is that you do.
I have felt very fortunate. Let me say, I'm not going to say it's all been rainbows and unicorns. I think I've been on a similar emotional roller coaster that from what I'm gleaned from friends' social media posts, family social media posts, and just strangers' social media posts, that like I've been experiencing that same kind of range of emotions that have been fluctuating. Some days I'm like, you know what? I got the hang of this. This is okay. This I can deal with. And other days I'm like, what is happening? What am I doing? What's going on? Work-wise, it's been, I'm very fortunate, you know, I work for myself. So in that regard, that hasn't rocked my world as much. And I think that's been a big part of the reason that I've been able to kind of be okay with things a little bit more, because I am fortunate to have that autonomy. And so that much of what I'm doing is just shifted to virtual, which is cool. It works that way. The big thing for me is I'm married. I have 2 stepkids.
Mm-hmm. How old
when
are
they announced Noah he'll be 16 in like a month.
Yeah.
And Chloe is 13. They're awesome. They're amazing kids.
And I'm kind of like, because my kids are so young, and 13 and 16 have got to be self-sufficient and not require so much attention during the day. And, you know, for me, it is just, and for my wife, it's been impossible to try to really find a balance between work and parenting and also teaching.
Yeah. And I think that has been, you know, again, I think that's been another part of my personal situation that we can say, hey, Noah has like 6 high school courses that he's taking right now, all online. So they've gone through their own process and we've gone through the process of figuring out, okay, we're going to hold you accountable. You have your work to do, but there's only but so much hand holding that we can do. Right. So, and they're great kids. They're super smart. You know, they're straight A students. And so I think we all feel very lucky that we have that trust and can say like, okay, starting at 10 a.m., like you're on the clock, whatever you don't finish today, you're going to have to make up for tomorrow. And so I think the past couple of weeks, I'll say, I feel like we've gotten in a good rhythm with the schoolwork and the work hours. My husband he's a middle school math teacher. This is his first year teaching, if you can believe it. Right before this all happened, he was complaining that he was like, I can't believe my first year teaching and we're not going to get any snow days. And then this happens. And he's like, well, okay. So that's been new for him, you know, working from home and having to make all of that adjustment. So there've been a lot of adjustments, but I think for the most part, we're kind of a go with the flow kind of crew. And it's been, you know, we're just doing the best we can.
Yeah. My wife's a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this has been interesting for her, and she's been at it for over a decade now. So it's a real change of pace, but also the amount of work that goes into it from home. You know, I've always known like she's been working on stuff at night, you know, getting lessons ready for the next day and all that kind of stuff. And we're talking about kindergarten level. So it's not like we're doing calculus here, but it's still a ton of work. But now, like the amount of time that she spends having conferences with parents and just connecting with her students one-on-one, it's way more than a full-time job. Like she is completely booked all day long. So that kind of leaves the kids and me to kind of figure out how how we're going to get some teaching done on our own time. But
Yeah.
it's been interesting for sure. And we're all adjusting. We're all, coming to it. We just hope that in September we can get back to a somewhat normal routine. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know. I've heard kind of murmurings about, not with my husband's school, but just with friends in New York, actually, who are their schools are having conversations around what that's going to look like going back, maybe part-time in person, part-time in doing virtual. So who knows? I don't know. It's going to be different.
So why don't you tell me about your life since you came to Virginia? I'll just give you a little heads up here. I don't do a lot of research. I don't like to know a lot going in because I want you to tell me as if I'm hearing it for the first time, because it is the first time. The only research I did do was read your About Me page on your company there.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit about you, and you sound like a very accomplished and driven person. So I would love to know about what brought you to Richmond and what those first couple of years here were like for you.
Sure. Yeah. So I should say that if you caught it in the beginning, I minored in legal studies in college and had every intention of wanting to go to law school immediately after college. When I was, as young as I think like fourth grade, if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I either wanted to be a lawyer or a comedian. Those were like my two. And I feel like that's the perfect way to describe me, is like super serious and put together. And then when my friends and family that know me really well and people who I've worked with for a long time know I'm like the biggest goofball too.
That's funny. I also used to want to be a comedian, not a lawyer, but just the comedian part.
It seems like such a fun job, right? Like
of course.
And making people laugh. I think there's something so special, and it's such a gift. I'm not saying I have it. I don't. The thought of like actually doing stand-up comedy is, I took an improv class once and I was like, oh no, I can't. I would never be able to do this. But I so admire those people. So I moved down to Richmond and I took my LSAT. I was like, all right, well, let's do some research on schools down there, studied for the LSAT, took it. And when I was in the middle of the test, I kind of had this moment. I like looked around the room and I'm like, no, I don't think I want to go to law school. I should say, before I took the test, and because I'm a little bit of a dork like this, I interviewed several attorneys and I was like, I'm thinking about going to law school. Here's what I think I want to do. At the time, I thought I wanted to do corporate law. And I asked them, I interviewed kind of like family friends who are attorneys all over the US, they were probably like 10 total. And I just said, do you love what you do? Would you do it over again? And 9 out of 10 of them, I kid you not, were like, absolutely not. Do not do it. Like, wow. Don't do it. Now, mind you, the test is already scheduled. Like I'm taking the test.
What would they have rather done?
Anything. They were miserable. They told me, and they had no issues with pouring it all out. Now, look, it may have been the particular roles, the particular firms, that maybe it was one area of law, but really they were passionate about another area of law. I don't know. I think there's value in kind of learning from others who have done something that you think you might want to do. And that's some of the advice that I gave a talk at one of my friends' classes at VCU. And that's what they said, what advice do you have for people who are graduating and think they want to go into a field? I was like, talk to people who are doing it. If you really think, and if you haven't done an internship or something like that. But anyway, I digress. So I decided after these conversations, and by the way, the one person who really loved his job as an attorney was a public defender in Staten Island. And he's like, I make absolutely no money and I absolutely love what I do. Wow. And I was like, well, I kind of want to make some money. I don't know if I could do public defense. That seems so far from what I thought, but
you would have to love the job to be able to do it.
And he did.
That job. Yeah.
He did, absolutely. And he's a judge now, but he did it for many years and he loved it. And so in the middle of the test, and I'm like, all right, I don't think I'm going to do this, but I'm going to finish the test. I'll have the scores for a few years. And shortly after that, I ended up kind of falling into the consulting world, getting connected with someone who owned a small consulting firm here in Richmond. I was, still kind of pretty fresh out of college. I do fancy myself a rather driven person. And so I think she kind of saw some of that in me and was like, let's do it. Come on board. And that was my first kind of like entree, into the consulting world, which, by the way, at the time I had no idea existed. And now I talk to students who are graduating or in college, and they're like, I want to be a consultant. And I'm like, I still am not sure that I know what that means. So like, how
I
do
was
you
going to
know?
ask you, like, consulting what? Like, what
Well,
does that mean? I call myself a communications consultant, but what do you call yourself? Or at that point, what were you calling yourself?
Well, at that point, so the company that I started working for was an HR and executive compensation consulting firm. They were very niche, did a lot of like HR law, executive benefits, executive compensation. They were very specialized and great at what they did, so much so that years later they want to get acquired by a much larger firm based out of Chicago. But it wasn't HR law, HR consulting wasn't really, at the time, I didn't know if that was kind of my thing. Like I said, I was still kind of figuring this all out. But to answer your question, I think more succinctly, I think in a certain way, people view you as an advisor, right? If it's communications consulting, for me, if I have to put something on LinkedIn or kind of Facebook where they make you choose a service area, I mean, technically it's consulting. What I do now is more in the field of mediation or conflict resolution. You can call it consulting if you'd like. I do have a certain level of expertise in it. And I think when you do have a certain level of expertise, people call on you for that expertise, right? And so consultant, advisor, consigliere, whatever you want to, whatever you want to call it. But at the time, I was sort of really intrigued that this existed, and it always makes me laugh that now it is, it's a major. It's something that students decide they want to do even before they've ever consulted.
Well, consultant to me, back from when I first moved to Virginia, I worked at a TV station, and we used to have quote unquote consultants come in and tell the anchors and the on-air personalities that their hair was wrong. This is what they need to do to their makeup, their outfit, that kind of stuff. So back then, I always had a very negative connotation for consultants because their job was to come in, make suggestions, and then a year later come in and make different suggestions.
It's kind of not that different, right? I mean, that's why, and I think that's why consultants get a bad rap. I used to work with someone who was like, if you ever don't want to talk to someone on an airplane, just tell them you're a consultant and they'll just stop talking to you. But yeah, I think consultants get a bad rap. And I think at the end of the day, like with anything, it comes down to what kind of person you are and what do you actually, do people genuinely trust your opinion and want it? So,
well, do you have the expertise to back up whatever it is that you're consulting on?
Yeah.
And is your input valuable if it is taken and put into practice?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you became a consultant.
So I became a consultant, and then I continued to be a consultant for many years, but I moved, then found my way to another consulting firm in Richmond. At the time, I think I was like employee number 10, and I was with that company for almost 7 years and did everything. I started off as like an associate consultant, so kind of like a, fancy title for a project manager, and moved my way up to an even fancier title of CEO. And so
wow.
Had the opportunity to stay with that company and really see, going from 10 people to over 50 people, and really having the opportunity to work with global companies working on major change initiatives within their organizations. And that's when I really started to kind of get my feet wet, and then obviously get a lot more experience in the organizational development.
You can't say you got your feet wet if you're the CEO. Like your
in
feet
the beginning. No. In the
been wet.
This is true. The feet, I was swimming. I was swimming by that point. But no, but in the beginning, I was kind of really, so it went from intrigue to really this love of, the true people side of HR. So I got to see what that organizational development arena looked like, and I really, really loved it. Change management, a lot of culture strategy was the work that I did there, and really, really loved it. And loved the process of getting to see the business from every different angle too.
Change management is something to me that's kind of new. It's like a new term. Like, you haven't really heard that before, like 5-10 years ago. It wasn't a thing. So were you kind of like or maybe it was and I didn't know it, but were you kind of on the front lines of that, making that more of like a mainstream term?
Maybe. I mean, I think it depends on how like entrenched you have been in that field, because now sometimes I'll come across articles from like the 80s on change management. I mean,
Oh, really?
it's been around for a long time, but I think, so here's the thing with change. It has to happen, right? Like you were never not changing, but for large organizations, for an entire company to shift, so many other little things have to happen in order for it, in order for insert whatever change it is
Mm-hmm.
to be effective. I think what's caught on is this idea of, or should I say more kind of organizations more readily embracing change, because, and probably what you've heard along when alongside the term change management, is that we can't do things the way we've always done them. We have to adapt to
Yeah.
insert, to accommodate a new generation of employees, all of these things, right? But I think we're more open to the idea of change maybe than we ever have been. Certainly not notwithstanding our current situation, which has thrown us all into the deep end of change very, very
Sure.
quickly.
So what do you do? Is what you do as a consultant in that field then come into a company who says, we recognize we need to have some sort of change with
Yeah.
with our workplace culture, but our leadership or whoever, we're a very traditional, we're a very conservative company, and this is going to be very hard for us. And do you come in and kind of mediate between the two sides?
Well, so I'll delineate between, I don't know that I would describe what I currently do as change management, though if you stick
Okay.
with the
Okay.
kind of meta term of everything is change management, which is sort of my philosophy, right? Like everything is change management. You are change managing your household of homeschooling your kids while your wife is change managing her transition. But in an organizational sense, I think I would describe the work that I did up until going out on my own as change management, organizational development, culture strategy. And to answer your question, yes, companies were coming to the consulting firm and saying, you name it, we want to be more innovative and we want to implement XYZ innovation initiative that we want to roll out over the next 3 years. Help us do that. What does that look like for our frontline employees? What does it look like for leadership? What do we need at each level? How do we communicate it? All of those things. The thing that I think kind of grinded me down about change management and still exhausts me a little bit is that people want change, but they want it incredibly quickly. And when you're talking about implementing a massive change initiative inside an organization, it takes time.
Oh,
Like
sure.
that doesn't happen in a few months.
Right.
And it takes I mean, of course, depending on the size of the company too, it can just be an incredibly lengthy process that requires patience. And there aren't many people at the top of any company. They're not in those positions because they're like, I'm just going to sit back and like watch things unfold, right? They're in those positions because they want to keep things moving and keep things changing. So that was a lot of the work that I did. The work I'm doing now so I'm a certified mediator, and it's been sort of a journey to get where I am, but I am a certified mediator.
So let's stop right there.
Yes. Okay.
You told me you were a CEO and now you're a certified mediator.
Yes.
How do you, or why do you leave your former job and become something else and go off on your own?
Yeah, well, I probably would have stayed with the consulting company I was at forever. It was a family-owned business and a husband-wife duo who decided to split off and go their own ways. I was obviously part of those discussions, and then there was a point where I was like, crap, what do I do next? Like I was planning on staying here for a while more because I really loved the work that I did.
Because
But
7 years
like,
is a good chunk of time.
it's a good chunk of time. And, at the time I had friends who were switching jobs every couple of years. And I even wrote an article on, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was in ink. And it was like, one of the best career moves might be staying where you are and really like digging in and growing with a company. And I still believe that. I think that there is, depends on the company, depends on your colleagues, depends on, what the work you're actually doing. But yeah, I mean, it was an amazing journey, and I was really bummed when it ended, but at the same time, grateful. You look back on everything through a different lens, right? And so at the time, I was sort of like, wow, all right, what's next? This gives me an opportunity to figure out, what do I want to do? And so, not dissimilar to what I did when I was interested in going to law school, I sat down with people. I sat down with clients. I sat down with former clients. I sat down with colleagues. I sat down with bosses. And I was like, what do you think I'm good at? What is it that you think is really a strength of mine that you could see me doing after this? And by and large, people told me, you're comfortable in chaotic situations, like you're good, you're a grounding force, you're calm, you're great at building consensus, lots of other really nice things that were really wonderful to hear. But at the end of it, I was like, well, how do I make money? Like, what does that actually look like in a job role?
But how great is that candid feedback that you can pull out of, these people and clients and friends and coworkers? It's so valuable.
I was so grateful. I was really grateful. And one of the reasons I love Richmond is because I think that you can reach out to any one person and say, hey, I'm interested in having a conversation about X, Y, and Z. And people don't hesitate. If they have the connection and they know someone to connect you with, they will do it. And that's how I had many of those conversations too. It just kind of was like a trail of breadcrumbs. And I should say, throughout my time in the change management role, and doing all kind of going around working with all these different companies, one thing was consistent. And that was when we'd go in, talk about these big change initiatives, many of the employees at these companies just wanted to vent about stuff that had happened years ago. They were just so grateful to have someone else in the room who wasn't their manager or a boss or even another coworker. And they're like, hold on, before we implement X, Y, and Z, let's talk about something we tried to do 3 years ago that I'm still holding on to.
Yeah.
And every time this would happen, I'd kind of bookmark it. And really there was a lot of interpersonal tension there. And so I would bookmark it. And then when I went out, now fast forward, I'm having these kind of conversations as I'm transitioning out of the consulting company. And I met an attorney turned mediator. And I said, let me share this idea with you. It's something I've been kind of mulling over. What do you think about workplace conflict resolution and mediation? What does that space look like in Richmond? What do you think? Is it kind of a crazy idea? And I shared a little bit about how I could envision the transition from organizational development consulting to mediation. And he was like, I think it's great. I think it's a brilliant idea. Kind of gave me a little bit of a lay of the land in Richmond, and then connected me with 3 other people. So I continued having conversations and sort of kind of proof of concepting this idea for workplace conflict resolution and mediation. While I was doing that, I had some people reach out to me and say, hey, we're doing XYZ. We're going through a strategic planning process. Would you be interested in helping us do it? And so I sort of am a little bit of an accidental entrepreneur. I never really wanted to work for myself. I really love a team.
Was this because you were offering a service, or you were going into a service that really didn't have a lot of competition, and there was a real need for conflict resolution?
I think so. I mean, I know there are certainly companies that do it. I mean, all over the country. And then there are mediators through courts that work specifically with courts. And then there are people who do arbitration inside companies, which is different from mediation, by the way. And so it's happening, but
so this is kind of a mix though of your background of legal and your background of HR, combining it into what? Yeah, you're shaking your head yes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Well, it's sort of I do feel that way, but don't get me wrong. Some days I'm like, what would it have been like if I did go to law school? But on most every day, I think, wow, I've landed exactly where I think I have always meant to be, which is the wildest and coolest feeling. And don't get me wrong, I mean, working for yourself is really difficult. And brings on its own set of challenges. But I think the work itself, I didn't, again, mediation, I don't know, I would have jumped straight to being an attorney, which is what my original plan was. And then somehow ended up in HR consulting and organizational development, change management consulting. And then through a series of conversations, ended up meeting an attorney turned mediator who happened to also kind of have some experience in labor relations and union negotiations. And so really intimately understood kind of the workplace side of it.
Yeah.
And gave me the confidence to just start formalizing, if you will, what I thought could be a cool offering that was needed, that I think was needed based on my experience in my previous consulting work.
So what year was this that you started forming this entity?
Late 2017, like end of
Oh, wow.
2017.
So that's relatively recent.
Pretty recent. Yeah, it's been a couple years that I've been out on my own. I had bought the domain name for my company before that, just because I had a conversation with someone and they said they were kind of complaining about someone they had just had a conversation with. And they said, I wish they would do just a complete 360. And I remember thinking to myself, you don't want them to do a 360. If they do a 360, they'll be exactly where they ended up, where they're starting from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, 180, that'd be a cool business name. And I kind of, again, just like bookmarked it and then ended up buying the domain name with not even a thought of what I would do with it. Just was like, I don't know, 180.
So your domain name is 180.io?
.io, yeah.
Okay.
.com was taken.
Yeah.
Sorry. It flows. Yeah, 180.io. And yes, so what I ended up formalizing over the span of, the next several months was workplace conflict resolution and mediation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, what I've been doing, what I do.
That's such an interesting thing, because I mean, I don't want to like put you on the spot here, but like when you go in to these companies and you do some conflict resolution, are you there on behalf of the employee or the employer? Or are you honestly a impartial, I'm listening to both sides?
It's a really great question. The employer obviously brings me in, right? Like an employee is not going to reach out to me and pay out of pocket. Now they might, if they say, I want to hire a conflict coach and I don't even want them affiliated with my company. And some people do reach out to me and I do conflict coaching. So people might reach out and they bring to me a particular situation they're dealing with, or maybe they just know that they are conflict avoidant and it's come up several times throughout their careers. And I work with them one-on-one in that way. But for many of my clients, the employer is bringing me in and they're saying they're coming from one of two places, right? Either reactive, which like, oh crap, something's happened and we want to fix it. And that could be a disagreement between employees that is maybe elevated above HR, but not quite to the level of like, we need to bring in attorneys, right? Mm-hmm. Or they're coming from a more preventative or proactive place where they're saying nothing's happened, but we know that we want to equip our employees with the types of skills that they need to productively handle conflict at work. So I might do workshops or some sort of training. So there are a couple different ways that I'm working with and for people, but you're right. At the end of the day, there is what they're paying me for truly is to be impartial.
Yeah.
And to be the person who is not the employer and not the employee. And that's the whole value that I bring, honestly.
I just wonder how difficult it might be for for employees to walk into a workshop and see you there and say, uh-oh, who's this person? Obviously, the company brought them in for some reason. I'm scared.
Yes, I try not to surprise people. I really advise against that. I have had, I have had a couple of people suggest like, so should we just like bring the two employees in a room and then have you there? And I'm like, no. I like to, depends on the situation, but typically everyone has a heads up, whether it's a workshop or whether it is a mediation between like a manager and a direct report or executive team members. There's a decent amount of prep that goes into it. And I have a whole kind of introduction to the process that I walk people through too, because I mean, I have a role, but I'm also asking them to kind of be respectful of each other's roles in the process as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I try not to surprise people. I can see, yeah, that would be that. The conflict
Yeah.
resolution sounds scary enough as it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the workforce for a number of years. So I'm just trying to go back through my mind of all the different scenarios where someone like you could have came in or have come in to the building, and what it was like for the employees involved, because
Yeah.
as employees you're always wondering, what's HR thinking, what are they doing, who are they working for, are they
Well,
are
so
they
that's
do
a
they really are they really on my side here?
Well, so that's a really great point. And I do have, that is, I think there is a perception of HR inside companies, or, I mean, let's be honest, like relationships exist at work, right? If someone
Sure.
has been in HR for 20 years and a manager has been at the company for that long as well, there's a relationship level that manager's direct report may not feel comfortable getting in the middle of, or
Hmm.
they may have all of their their own ideas about, well, if I go to HR, can I really be honest because that person's super tight with my manager, and how's that going to work? Or HR is sometimes, say that it can be viewed as the principal's office. I don't think it is, but I think that, or
I
maybe
think
in
it
some
I think
companies
it's
it
yeah, I
is.
think it depends on what company and how they
Right.
structure, but yeah.
Yeah. I know a ton of people in HR, and they're really amazing, amazing people. And some of
Right.
them just don't have the capacity to take on all of those little issues that are bubbling up that can cause a lot of tension and, other ripple effects in the workplace. But yeah.
Yeah. It is like you say, how their HR department is. Like, is it set up
Mhm.
to be like a guidance counselor's office, or is it set up to be the principal's office? And if
Yeah.
it's the principal's office, you probably don't want to go to HR.
Who wants to go to the principal's office?
That's
I know.
exactly.
Guidance
But you
counselor,
also
that's
don't
a good way
but
to
you
put it.
also don't want to mistake the principal for the guidance counselor and start telling them all of your innermost feelings and secrets.
Also true. And it's tough, right? It's tough to
It
figure
is
out,
tough because you have
especially for new
workplace.
employees.
Yes, and you have workplace relationships and you get friendly with people, and like you said, if you're there for 20 years and you're with the same person, you came up together in the company for 20 years, there's a level of familiarity and friendliness.
Yeah.
So it's got to be tough when you get into those types of situations where you have a company that's established and has been around for a while, and you're doing some of the conflict resolution between people who have a deep relationship.
Hmm. And those are sometimes the toughest
Yeah.
situations, because, as whenever I tell people I do conflict resolution and mediation, nearly everyone has the same response. They either think of a workplace conflict that they're like, oh
Right.
man, I could have used you, 6 months ago.
Because everybody has those stories.
Everybody has
Everybody.
them. Or you've experienced personal conflict in some sort of way, that before, when there were networking events and dinner parties, people would be like, hey, let me ask you a quick question. I have this friend who, insert whatever situation, right? But
Uh-huh.
it's something that everyone experiences
Yeah.
on some level at some point in their life. So yeah, there are lots of different things that go with it. And it's difficult because we all experience it from our own place, from our own reality, right?
Yeah. So tell me, how has this endeavor for you, this creating 180, how has it grown over the past couple of years?
It's just me, and it has been just me, and I quite like it that way, I'll say.
Yeah. Well, you
And
don't
so
have any
some people,
conflicts that you have to worry about.
I don't have, there's no one I'm managing. It's quite a relief, honestly. I enjoy it, but I have, some people have asked me, are you going to grow? Will you hire people? And I think one of the ways that I'm going to say I've grown is I have a healthy level of detachment from the idea of growth. I think growth for me right now is, and what over the past couple of years, what it has been really refining my services, making sure that what I'm offering is, to your point, what people actually want and need. And so there's been a great deal of that, that I've been doing. And I think just kind of focusing on doing work that I love. I think as an entrepreneur, and it can be really difficult to say no, and it's
Hmm.
something that I've really worked on over the years. And there's something very freeing about doing work that I truly feel connected to, that I can see an impact from, and that I really, really enjoy. So it's grown. I think there's been a great deal of personal growth for me. And sure, my mind wanders and says, oh, what would I do? What would it look like if it were more than me, or if I were to,
Sure.
add on? But it's been really neat.
So have you had to turn down some potential opportunities because you're kind of overbooked?
That's always a great place to be.
Yeah.
But I think what it's, yes, in some cases, and in some cases it's just been work that I feel like is slightly out of scope from what I want to be doing. And
Yeah.
our earlier conversation around change management and culture strategy, the work that I'm doing is closely related to all of those things. And so I think I get drawn in because I did it for so long and have a passion for it. It can be easy to kind of have people pull you in that direction and say, oh, well, let us pick your brain about this, or can we get would you be interested in doing work with us on XYZ? But those are the things that I've said, I really want to stay in my lane, and I really want to keep carving out this niche that I've been working on. And that has been, it's rewarding when I can say no, but it's to then focus my time on the thing that I really do enjoy doing.
So at the end of a session, or at the end of a project, do you just hand back a report and say, here you go, here's my take on the whole thing, and here's what I consult you to do going forward?
I do a version of a report. Mine is not, it does include some suggestions and recommendations, but a lot of the work that I do now I capture what they come up with. So whether it's two people or whether it's a team of people, what I hand over to them is what I call an agreement snapshot. And in
Okay.
mediation, the result of a mediation, if you, and I mentioned that I will have soon, once we kind of get back to hosting mediations in person, I will have my mediation certification at the Supreme Court of Virginia
Oh,
level,
wow.
which is really great. There's family mediation experience that I have, but right now I'm focused on workplace mediation. But what you get at the end of a mediation session is an agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that in family mediation goes back to the court, the judge signs off on it. So what I do in workplace mediation, or some of the team facilitated team discussions that I do, is the report that I hand back to people is an agreement snapshot. And it is a list and sort of report out, if you will, of what the team has agreed they want to do differently moving forward.
Yeah.
So whether that's a middle ground that two or more parties have reached, whether it is an agreement on new communication practices so that they're not in this position again. So what I always hope when I deliver that is that, one, these are really reflective of what they want and what they're kind of deciding for their own path forward.
Yeah.
And two, that it feels very like human and for them, and something that they can actually continue to do when I'm out of the picture.
Now, is it like a document that HR can use and say, you agreed to this, and if you don't do it, then we have grounds, documentation,
Yeah,
in
I
other
guess it
words,
could go, it
yeah.
could go in a I'm not sure.
But
I'm
that's,
not
but
always
I,
privy to performance
right.
reviews, so it
Sure.
might go in some
But
files.
that's not why you're doing it, to provide
No,
HR the documentation they need to terminate someone down the road.
no, not often. I mean, if it's to that point, then the goal of the and there have been a couple of them that I've been involved in, but really, if it's to that point, then that relationship, the trust and respect, has disintegrated so
Mm,
much to the point where these people's work days are miserable. They have
yeah.
anxiety going into a meeting because they have to sit across from this person who the communication is completely broken down. And so there is, in some cases, kind of a last ditch effort to bring in someone completely impartial.
Yeah.
And my process, not dissimilar to yours going into these interviews, is like, I don't do too much digging. I just want to hear from them what's going on. And sometimes when you let someone who's not super close to the situation listen and view it, if you will, some paths do appear. So the hope is that, if it's to that point, that they're able to work something out. And if not, then in some cases I'll say to HR, like, yeah, I don't know, maybe this is not working. So you might consider moving teams, or perhaps a different management structure, or insert whatever
Yeah.
other ideas they might kick around.
I mean, the whole thing has always been so interesting to me, because I've been in communications for a long time, and I've never worked for internal communications on paper. However, being in communications departments that didn't have an internal communications team, we took that on, and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't really work in HR on paper. But when HR needed something, they would pull us in. And that's always been like my most enjoyable stuff, is like figuring out why people are the way they are, like why trying to get people to work together, trying to get them to like do their best work. But I'm a very emotional person as well. And I've been in situations at work in my old previous life where we would get into conflicts and I would not be able to take the business and separate it from personal and vice versa. So, I mean, that's got to be a tough thing for you to deal with, people who feel personally attacked or personally looked down upon or whatever, versus just like the business aspect.
Well, it's really difficult to do. It's actually nearly impossible to do because when you show up to work or when you were in those situations that you're referencing, you were still Matt Harrington. It's not like
Right.
there was a robot version of you that was like business Matt Harrington, no emotions, right? Like
Right.
you're a human being at the end of the day. And that's so much of what I talk about in my trainings first is I'm like, okay, to deal with conflict, you first have to understand it, right? Like if you try to show up and be someone completely different, you're going to be miserable because it's
Yeah.
just not how we operate. It's so incredibly difficult to completely emotionally remove yourself from a situation, and that's what you're effectively what you're asking people to do. But it's why people bring me in, because I don't have an emotional connection to a situation, right? But you and this other person, you have your own views of that situation and your own
Yeah.
emotions tied up in it for whatever reasons. Who knows? They may go back years, but it's
Right.
really
Or it
difficult
may
to
have been
do.
like a sentence taken out of context or whatever it could be. But for me, the easiest way to get over those things is to go out and have a beer, like outside of work, and like talk like normal human beings, and just like have
With
a
the person you're having the issue with.
yes, and have a
Yeah.
candid conversation about like, what's going on, man? You all right? You feeling all right? What's going on at home?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you get to the root of all that, and those little digs that you're taking so personally at the office become something that you can maybe work through and understand. Like,
Rarely ever is it about you.
right,
We're ego driven
right,
individuals, all of us to a certain extent, and our default is self-preservation, right? And so when someone makes this, makes a comment or writes that really short email that seems passive aggressive,
yeah,
maybe there's something we've done previously to elicit that type of response, and that's just that person's way of dealing
yeah.
with it. Or maybe it has nothing to do with us at all and we've made it about us, and now it's a thing between us and that
I
person.
wonder how often that one is of all the
All the
conflicts.
time.
How often is that one? The one that it's not about you at all. It's just that person is having a bad day. That person burnt his toast this morning. That person's, got a flat tire on her way to work.
It
Has-
happens
Yeah.
all the time. It happens all the time. Yeah, it does. But I will say, and not to minimize it, there are a lot of situations where people do have that sentence out of context or the passive aggressive email. These things happen so frequently or frequently enough, and don't ever, and first time you brush it off. Second time you roll your eyes and you brush it off.
Yeah.
Third time, still haven't gone for the beer yet. You're assuming it doesn't have anything to do with you, or maybe you're assuming who knows what. But when people don't have the conversation, that's when it builds.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I love that advice and I agree wholeheartedly. When people come to me, one of the first questions I ask them is, have you had a conversation with the other person yet? And if they say no, then
Yeah.
that is our starting point.
It's
And
so
then
tough. It's so tough for people who are conflict averse. And they don't want to have that interaction.
it can be
Yeah.
really tough.
And that's why
Yeah,
you exist.
this is true. This is true. I
Tell
hope
me,
so. Yeah.
tell me something that is frustrating about what you do.
My husband asked me one time, he's like, do you ever work with people who just don't take your advice? Which I thought was a funny question coming from him because he doesn't often take my advice. So I'm like, oh, you mean like working with you? Not really. I think the most frustrating thing is I genuinely I do this because I want to help. And I think that based on what I know about myself and what others have told me about what I'm good at, I think I'm pretty good at it. And so if there's an opportunity for me to help people find, I call it a mutually acceptable path forward, right? Maybe it's not win-win, but maybe they both leave the conversation feeling okay or in a better place with it. then I'm all about that. But the thing that frustrates me is when someone says they are willing to put in the work, but they're not. And mediation, at the end of the day, you have to have two parties who are willing, or two or more parties who are willing. And they can't say they're willing and then shut down, right? They have to genuinely want to come to some sort of agreement or find a mutually acceptable solution. And there are some people who, at the end of the day, just don't actually want to put in the work. And that is frustrating. It's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for the other person or parties involved, because there's not much you can do with it.
I think what you do is much needed. It's a much needed
Thanks.
thing. What are your goals moving forward? You mentioned before that like a certification for family mediation. Is that something that
Yeah.
you would that you're looking into doing?
It's incredibly difficult, but I have found such fulfillment from the family mediation sessions that I have done throughout my training. You're required to do, just like any executive coaching or certification program, you're required to put in lots of hours in practice and mediation. And I had the opportunity not too long ago. There was a husband and wife who were going through a separation, and I was one of two mediators doing a child support, visitation, and custody. And it was actually a pretty amicable situation, but to be able to see them come out of it, they were so happy to have something to say, like, okay, a weight is lifted off our shoulders to now say, we have this on paper. We feel like we can go live our lives and both be there for our child. And it was just such a each of those experiences has been so amazing. And I do think I would like to do more of the family mediation.
Are there different types of certifications that you need to get to do something like that?
It's the one I'm doing. So it is, it will be family mediation through Supreme Court of Virginia. There is an additional kind of layer to the certification for divorce mediation, which I'm considering doing as well. Because there's so much of it that goes together. Again, incredibly tough, but I'm a step parent. I come from a divorced family. Like, I feel like it's in my bones, and I want to help other people. I like the idea of getting into that at some point. I don't know when that'll happen, but I really am loving the workplace conflict resolution mediation work that I'm doing now, but that would be down the line, I think.
Well, how has business been for you the past couple of months? Not a lot of workplaces to conflict about. I mean, if people are working from home, what's the conflict?
Well, I did a video recently on virtual conflict. So to your point about the earlier comment you made about your wife working more than she has even before, she's working more than a full-time job.
Yeah.
People are working more now that everyone is working remotely, and on top of it, there's this, like, there are no boundaries between school, dinner, work, sleep. Like, it's all mixed in, and it's creating a lot of stress for people. And on top of it, we all feel incredibly helpless. What can we do about this pandemic? And when people feel helpless, insecurity increases. And when we're insecure, not many of us are at our best selves. And so you can imagine how that might show up in different ways virtually. And it's easier than ever to be passive aggressive.
The eye roll on the Zoom meeting, the sighs that are extra audible.
The camera off, just the camera off alone sends people through. Imagine doing this whole interview and I just refuse to turn my camera on. It would be a very different experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, you communicate based on body language. They get their cues from body language.
Yeah.
And if there's no camera on, or if you're just, or you're wearing a stupid hat and a t-shirt,
or your hat's pulled down, I can't see your eyes. Totally. We scan and we look to say, is this person listening? Are they acknowledging me? Do they understand what I'm saying?
Have you ever done any kind of like recruiting? Because it would seem like these types of skills, identifying potential conflicts that could arise down the road, would be helpful in recruiting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how. No, I haven't formally done recruiting. In my previous life, I did a lot of interviewing candidates, which I loved. I just love, because I love learning about people like you. I just have a penchant for kind of understanding people and what motivates them. But I think if you were a recruiter, or, for any recruiters out there listening, I think it is an excellent practice to ask people how they handle conflict. Describe a situation where you had to manage a disagreement at work. How did that go? Or where you were part of a disagreement, and how did you handle it? How did you have that difficult conversation? And if they tell you, well, I didn't, I just never had the conversation. Well, that tells you something about their conflict management style, which is avoidant. And, barring that, I do lots of fun, I do some informal, fun conflict style assessments. And then in some of my trainings, I do more formal, kind of much more scientific conflict style assessments where it spits out your different conflict style and how you work with other people. But yeah, it would be neat to, it would certainly be neat to know that stuff up front about someone, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love all that stuff, like the personality assessments and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of pair up people based on strengths and weaknesses and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting to me. And I, like I said before, I love the part of HR, which is like empowering the people and making, and like having them feel like they can really do and thrive and do their best work. And they can't do it without getting through the conflict part of it. So what you do is super important.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. I like to think that doesn't always feel that way some days, but then you have, that conversation or that client who really, really has, a breakthrough, or they have that conversation after they've been avoiding it for so long.
Exactly. How good does that feel when somebody can like, oh, wait a minute, we can do this. We can work together. We can get this done. We can actually create something awesome together because we learned how to navigate through our differences.
Yeah. Or just grabbed the beer and had the conversation and finally got that weird hypothetical scenario that's been going on in your head for 3 months out and made it a reality and just had the conversation, because that's what we do. We ruminate on these things and it causes us great stress. And so there's a great deal of relief in just having the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is fun.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it was short notice, but what the hell?
Anything for a fellow upstate New Yorker.
That's right. You ever get up there anymore?
I went last summer and it was actually really lovely. Went like end of July last summer.
That's the perfect time to be there.
I go about once a year. My family comes down here to visit me more than I go up there, I'll admit. But yeah.
I went up last time I was there was November for a Bills game. We went with friends, and then I go up every summer. My parents are still there. My grandfather's still there. So
nice.
Go up to see family, and we're planning, hopefully, going up again July 4th around that time.
Oh, cool.
Go every year. Yeah. But
Yeah,
summers
that'll be
are the
good.
best time to be up there is the summers.
It is. I know. Yeah, it truly is.
All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. You asked me we asked me some tough questions. I liked it. Thank you.
You got everything out you wanted to get out?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right. That was a great chat with Natalie, and I'm so glad I was introduced to her through a mutual friend. What she does is just so interesting to me, having been witness to and maybe even having been a part of a few workplace conflicts. So if you want to know more about Natalie and what she does and the services that she offers, please check out 180.io. That's 180 spelled out .io. Okay, everyone, stay safe, stay focused, stay motivated, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing because I think you're doing great. The Caught by Happy podcast is powered by Ring Media. Join the Ring Media Network and let's make good stuff together. Just visit ringmedia.com. That's RRING media.com. Bye-bye.